Hello there. The summer after I graduated from university, I spent a few weeks in the Philippines, living with a family who ran a Baptist church in a village on the outskirts of a large city. I've sometimes said I got a whole gap year's worth of anecdotes during that 3 week stay. One of the more easily repeatable was my encounter with the family's approach to prayer. They prayed about everything. They prayed when they first met me at the airport, joking that the flight I'd taken had needed prayer given the questionable safety record of the small regional airline I'd chosen to fly to their island. They prayed before every journey, in fact, however long or short. They prayed every time any amount of food or drink was consumed in their home, and they prayed whenever anyone entered or left their home. Perhaps for some of you watching this, that's an entirely obvious, normal approach to prayer. But for me at the time, it was at first somewhat bewildering, surely too much, until I began to see how much this prayer seemed to form a solid foundation for their lives. Well, today we've reached my final reflection from the letter of James, and James ends with an appeal to pray. Even though much of the letter has been concerned with practical issues like how we choose to speak or use our money, in these closing remarks, everything is brought back to prayer. Whatever the circumstances, James is saying, open up that precious channel of communication with God. And then, as verse 16 memorably puts it, the prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. James recalls the power of the prayers of the prophet Elijah, telling us that we stand in this same tradition as those who can speak to God in prayer and deepen our understanding of his will, not just in our individual lives, but in the life of nations. This is the kind of prayer that can inspire a sinner to turn from the error of their ways. It can inspire better use of financial resources, or speech that sounds more like the words of Jesus, or simply healing. These thoughts from St. Aldate's are about themselves to take a summer break. So I wonder if you might like to reflect in the coming weeks on the place that prayer has in your life, perhaps particularly looking back at your experience of lockdown. I was speaking with someone the other day and then praying with them, and they apologised for the simplicity of their prayer. But I said I felt no apology was needed, for clearly what they were doing was speaking honestly to God. Far better a simple, heartfelt prayer than no prayer at all. I actually don't think the language particularly matters. What matters surely is that we are praying from the heart, not holding anything back. I recently heard of a quote attributed to Florence Nightingale, who I guess became yet more famous a few months ago when all those temporary hospitals were built bearing her name. I'm not sure how many of those who know of Florence Nightingale, the nurse, also know of the depth of her Christian faith. But when Florence was asked her secret, she replied, "Well, I can give only one explanation. That is, that I have kept nothing back from God." It seems to me the kind of response of which James would have approved. Probably the brother of Jesus himself has offered us this short letter, encouraging a depth of faith which is then matched by words and deeds that are recognisably Christian. And how our world needs more of that. So my prayer is that both you and I might find something in James's wisdom that inspires us on our own journey, that we would be inspired, as he suggests in chapter 5, to confess our sins, to pray in faith for healing, to point people back in God's direction, and indeed to sing songs of praise. Perhaps the most remarkable, wonderful thing is that these deep truths about what it is to live out the Christian faith are the same now as when James wrote 2,000 years ago. And they're the same priorities, whether applied in Oxford or a Filipino village or anywhere in between. So may we, inspired by James, live and love, speak and pray in ways that point to the beautiful way of Christ himself.